Hello everyone, my name is Nicoya, and this is the Roland MC-505, or at least it's the front panel thereof. So on a previous video, I repaired the LCD, which would usually fit in here, but it's in the top of the case. And I mentioned on that video that some of the pots are a little bit wobbly, and they are indeed very wobbly. I thought about going ahead and replacing them all, but I think I can actually get by with just fixing them. So we're going to fix some wobbly pots. And we are going to address some breaks on the PCB, which are under these pots here. We're going to address some torn traces, which are over here. And yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So, first step is just addressing wobbly pots in general, because that's probably what you're going to be looking at, assuming you didn't drop one of these down the stairs. And the cause of this is that these little 9mm pots are made in two halves. So you have the upper half here, which has the bushing here, which is threaded, and we'll get back to that later in the video. And then it has the bottom half, and they're held together by this metal clip here that comes around the top and it gets folded under the bottom, and then it has little feet that rest against the PCB, and then on the back side they have little clip pins that you solder in. And so what happens is that if you give these a real punch, these clips on the bottom, these tabs on the bottom will bend out, and they won't be holding the pot together quite as sturdily. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder this, then I'm going to pinch those tabs back so they're holding tight again, and then I'm going to solder it back in. So let's give that a try. Now, it will be a venture to see if I can get these tabs unsoldered, but we'll see how this goes. I might have to bring in my hot air or my soldering iron, but I think we're liquid. Yeah, that's not bad. Let's see how this one goes. Looking pretty good. All right. Now, how loose are we? Pretty loose. Let me just see if I can gently squeeze these tabs a little bit. See what happens if I do that. Alright, I'm going to grab my soldering iron and heat this up while I pull this out. I think that'll work a bit better, and I'll try not to melt the cord on this. Here we go, and the other side. Perfect. Clean that up. And the pot is out. So let's get you zoomed in here and we'll have a closer look at this. All right, so here we can see the underside of the pot. You can see the 4 fingers that are folded over. And, you know, that's the only thing really keeping this pot together. And these are flexed out a little bit. And so I'm going to grab my pliers and pinch them together. I think that works pretty well. So that is feeling nice and tight now. There's no more slop in that. So we can pop this back in the board and solder it in place. Now, when these are brand new, they're supposed to snap in, but I think the snap has gone out of these legs, and so I'm going to have to kind of solder it in gently and then remelt the solder a little bit and make sure it's sitting up against the board so it's not cockeyed leaning one way or the other. See if I can get my hand around the other side. And that feels like we're against the board now. And I'm going to flip this back over. Double check and make sure that is sitting correctly. So we got all 4 of the feet up against the board. So that is sitting nicely. It is obviously still slightly wiggly since we only have 1 leg soldered down. But we will solve that by soldering the rest of the legs down. All right, so I am going to just check that under the microscope quickly to make sure I didn't screw that up. Oh yeah, those solder joints look beautiful. Now I did get a little bit more solder on some of those pins than I necessarily meant to, but that's fine. So now's going to be the challenging one, is dealing with this one that whoever was in here last managed to completely mess up. So I'm going to give myself the advantage of some extra heat when I'm going for these pins. And I don't think there's any solder on those 2 there, so yeah, I'll just see if I can pry them up. Because there ain't no copper pads left. So if you excuse me a minute, I'm going to do this under the microscope. Alright, well, good news is that the pot itself looks fine. It is definitely bashed in here, so we're going to have to tighten that up. Might as well do all 4 while we're here. That looks pretty good. So make sure these pins are straightened out. They're a little bit wonky looking. Can I get in here with these? Yep. Yeah, practically good as new. Which, you know, they most definitely are not. That leg is sitting funny here. So let's make sure, because that's what's going to set this, you know, vertically on the board and not have it leaning around. Oops. Just saying this pin here is sitting a little bit wonky, and that's the one that's going to be sitting on the board, keeping it from leaning over. So we can pop this back in at least, and we're going to have a little bit of fun rebuilding the traces because there is not much left there. All right, so I need to scrape away some of this solder mask here so I can bridge the contact with this trace, and so I'm going to do that under the microscope. All right, so these pads are not necessarily looking amazing, but they're looking much better than they were, and so we should be able to solder to them with probably a little bit of bodge wire added in. So let's give that a try. There we go, sitting pretty nicely this time, but still going to do one. Oh, for goodness sakes. This whole pad is lifted up here, which is not great. In fact, pads on both sides are lifted up. So we'll just push those back down and pretend like we didn't see that. Now, it's obviously not holding super tight just yet because the pads are, you know, not really on the board anymore. But it should be good enough. There we go. So now we're going to get to the tricky part, And let's see, can I use this wire for this? Probably. Yeah, should be able to work with that. I'm going to sit down for this because this is going to be a little bit complicated. Step one, I want to tin these pads. Assuming I can. Here we go. Now, step two, I'll use a little bit of this bus wire. And I'll hopefully be able to just solder this one right in here. That conducts heat really well. Let me hold on to that with something else. All right, that should be sufficient for that one. Not incredibly beautiful, but it should do, I hope. Now, tin the next pad up here on this side. And then we'll see if we can get this bus wire in. I'm going to try to snip this off first this time. So that the bus wire is just sitting there while I solder it. We'll see how that works. Still need to get it connected to the pin. Alright, I got a bunch of solder on there. I think it's connected. Alright, this last one's going to be pretty tricky because it's in the middle. But we'll see how we do. Probably should have started with this one if I were a smarter person. And like that. Well, that seems to be stuck. That's good. Now, if I snip this off, so this is connected up to here, so I'm going to leave that a little bit long, just in case I want to connect that over there. That I should be able to snip off. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to give that continuity test, definitely. So I'm going to set that right in the middle, which it already is, thankfully. And that needs to be ohms. And from ground to this pin is going to be 2.5 k ohm. Does that make sense? Maybe. And from this pin to this pin is 2.5 k ohm. That must be right then. And then, like, if I measure this one to the center, 2.5, and measure over to here, 2.5. That seems right. Okay. So we are not shorted out. We have successfully repaired this potentiometer, and now we have this one to deal with. So this one has some cracked traces, but they're not lifted. At least I don't think they're lifted. And some traces beside it, I think are fine. One of them was measuring a little bit high resistance, and so I'm probably going to scrape off some solder mask there and just solder over it. But other than that, the rest of these pots are going to be basically the same. Other than the volume pot up here, I need to make sure that this ground connection is better because that got torn off. And so that one's going to be pretty simple. I'll just scrape some more solder mask there and solder it up. So I'm going to do all the pots here and we will meet you back for the next part. All right, we are back and we no longer have wiggly knobs. These are all rock solid. And to keep them that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a page out of Roland's book here, where they put a reinforcement plate on the volume and the low boost knob, and I made my own reinforcement plates. So these are PTG printed. You can obviously, cut them out of metal like those, or print them in some other plastic, or laser cut them out of, a sheet of polystyrene or whatever. Important thing is they're, again, 1.5 millimeters thick, and I will put up a CAD drawing on the screen so that you can replicate this. I don't really want to share the original free CAD drawing because I was making a complete mess of things with my parametrics going off the wrong origin points. Anyway, that aside, these will slide down over the knobs, and then you will have to pick up a little bit of hardware, which is some 9mm, which are not actually, I don't think they're, no, they are M9. They're 9mm pot washers and nuts. And so you'll screw those down, hopefully not cross-threading them, which is really easy to do. And is that cross-threaded already? Yes, it is. Anyway, you screw these down, and if I can get that on properly. No, that's a cross-threaded again. Yep, cross-threaded again. There we go. So once those are all screwed down, all these pots are going to be reinforced against each other, and so still, if you punch down straight at them, they're going to get screwed up. But hopefully, if you hit them from the side, they'll be a little bit more resistant to completely folding over. But I don't know how hard you hit your knob, so maybe you'll still manage to damage them. Anyway, I'm going to get this back together and make sure that it still works. All right, got about 3/4 of the screws back in it. Put the knob back on here. And everything is working now. All of my knobs are working. They are nice and tight. I left the caps off of these ones so you can see. Well, that one's on the floor now. Just so you can see the hardware fits really nicely in here. There's no problem with that. Everything super solid. They all read fine. The sliders, which we didn't touch, could use a lot of contact cleaner, but I'll get to that later. I also want to replace the switches under here because they're a little bit high resistance. But it works, so that's what I care about. I went through the self-check to test all of these, that they are all working on the the 80 test, which I think is shift 7 after you go into the test mode, which is the D-beam buttons and function, then you turn it on, wait for the display, etc. Pull up the service manual, you'll figure it out. Anyway, everything's working, everything's solid. I'm really happy. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you on the next one.